Rise up! Team Rise! Rise up! Team Rise!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL Wire site, all about the Arizona Cardinals. And my co-host, as always, is Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site. And this episode 249 comes on our Thanksgiving week. And the Arizona Cardinals did not play this past weekend. They were on their bye. But they do return from their bye this weekend, and they will take on the LA Rams as they begin December with 5 ball games to close the season, the next 3 at home. What are we going to talk about in this edition of the show? We're going to start off, since it is Thanksgiving, we're going to talk about what we're thankful for. What are we thankful for as Cardinals fans? What are the Cardinals thankful for? What should they be thankful for? With the return of Chase Edmonds to practice and to the lineup, the Cardinals are going to have 3 healthy running backs. How are they going to deal with that? Can they pull it off? Who's going to get squeezed for playing time? Jordan Mills, offensive tackle, you might have forgotten about him. He played a couple games, landed on injured reserve. He returns to practice. He's been designated for a return. What does that return mean? Will he be back in the lineup? What can we expect from that? DJ Humphries is in contract talks. We're going to talk about the significance of that potential contract moving forward. We're going to talk about what the Cardinals have to do specifically. What are some areas where they really need to improve on over the last 5 games? And then we'll look at the matchup this week against the LA Rams. Can they win? How will they win? How's that game playing out? What are our predictions? So that's coming up on this edition of the show. And let's go ahead and get started. So Seth, how did you enjoy the bye weekend? It was a commitment-free football weekend, at least on Sunday for us. How'd you spend it?
We had a charity event from one of my son's baseball teams, and then we got home and watched NFL Red Zone and all of the magical games that occurred on Sunday morning. I mean, the Sunday afternoon games were kind of boring, but you had the Sunday morning slate that was interesting to watch. You had some competitive games, and I think you saw in a positive way that the Arizona Cardinals are not as far off as maybe we all thought they were. I think the teams at the top of the NFC are really good, but the teams that are in that hunt area, and you know, you talked about it with me just now off the air. I mean, the NFC is so good that the 6th wild card is 8-3 right now. So I mean, it's going to be a tough nut to crack. But I mean, that means 2 wins and you're right in things, and I think that's where the Cardinals are getting close to being, and they can get there next year and be in that kind of, maybe that second tier of teams. Maybe they're not the team that year, but they're getting really, really close. And that's what we want to see, is continued improvement from this organization.
For me over the weekend, it's especially watching the 2 primetime games when you had San Francisco and Green Bay, and then on Monday night with the Ravens and the Rams. Considering the way the Cardinals played both the Ravens and the 49ers, you get the feeling like, wow, because the Cardinals' offense is the only offense that's really been able to do anything against San Francisco, and the Cardinals actually played the Ravens. Now, the question I pose was, are the Cardinals closer than we think, or did Baltimore just sort of are they that much better than they were in week 2? Because week 2 they were pretty dang good, and the Cardinals were still right there. They were still right there. So maybe it's just how the Cardinals match up with those particular teams, and I'm really interested for the final 5 games, because I look at, now I'll talk this a little bit later, I look at this last month of the season with the same sort of hope that the Cardinals got with the last half of the season with Bruce Arians in his first year, and also the way they closed the season in Ken Wisenhunt's first season, because it propelled them into success in year 2. But anyway, let's start with it. Since it is Thanksgiving and we still have a show, I thought this was a perfect time to kind of go something more. It's more fluffy. It's not the hardcore football stuff. But what are we thankful for with the Cardinals? I'm gonna go first. The number one thing I'm thankful for is Kyler Murray, because having Kyler Murray has removed that cloud of doubt about the quarterback future of the Cardinals that we dealt with under Kurt Warner, because, he's old. Then there was nothing. Then there was Carson Palmer, but you knew how much longer is this going to last. And then even last year with Josh Rosen, there was hope, but because of how they played, you were just hoping. He's got to be better than this, right? But now with Kyler Murray and the performance he's had, the quarterback position is no longer a question mark, and I am so thankful for that, because guess what? You and I know Arizona Cardinals fans have been waiting for a franchise quarterback forever. One that they've drafted and developed. Jake Plummer was the closest thing that we got back in the late 90s, and if you look at his numbers overall, he wasn't very good. We remember him fondly because of his 1998 season, but he had exactly one season with more touchdown passes than interceptions in his entire time with the Cardinals. He put up some pretty good numbers in Denver, but that's the closest thing that we've had to a franchise quarterback in my following the Cardinals since 1990. Yeah, I remember Tim Rosenbaugh, and then just the list of quarterbacks that followed. Kyler Murray, I am so thankful for this year.
Yeah, I think Murray's the easy one, and I'll kind of echo that, obviously, but I think the next one is Cliff Kingsbury, and I think part of this, and you and I have kind of hinted and intimated at this at times, but I think part of it simply is that Kingsbury came in with an idea and a vision, and part of what sold Kingsbury on the Arizona Cardinals was the availability to acquire Kyler Murray. And so I think getting Cliff Kingsbury was twofold. It was great in getting an offensive guru, a guy that is, probably one of the top 10 already offensive minds in the league. And, his vision and his willingness to kind of stand on the table and say, look, I want to be here, but I want to be here partially because we can take this guy and Kyler Murray, and we can be, the team that is innovative and takes the NFL into the next great juncture that it goes to. And I think getting Cliff and getting that accessibility was a crucial and key thing, and it's something that I'm thankful for. Obviously, we'll see how it works out over the long haul, but I think it's going to be great to watch unfold.
Number 2, what I'm thankful for is a healthy offensive line. We have not seen this in years. In years. Just think about the number of linemen we've filtered through in the starting lineup from 2016 and 2017 and 2018. And in 2019, with the exception of right tackle, there has been continuity. We've both Justin Pugh and A.Q. Shipley have not missed a single snap. DJ Humphries, who's never finished an NFL season healthy, has missed 4 snaps. And J.R. Sweezy has missed 3 snaps. And the right tackle position hasn't even been an abomination. The guy that was supposed to be the best offensive lineman of the group, Marcus Gilbert, he never actually played. And they've gotten okay to steady play from right tackle, whether it was Justin Murray or Jordan Mills or even Justin Pugh. This is the most pleasantly surprised I've been with an offensive line in I don't know how long.
Yeah, and I think it's been interesting to be able to watch their development, and it's something you and I have talked about at length about the failures of Steve Keim, and it was that he just never got a group that was able to have that continuity and give the team the ability to kind of, like you said, go day to day, week to week with the same crew, and all of that is what the key is for the Arizona Cardinals to have this kind of solid, if unspectacular, offensive line.
And honestly, that's all you really need. I'm number 3. I am still thankful that we get to watch Larry Fitzgerald play. It's not going to last forever. We don't know how much longer it's going to be. But my goodness, we have had a treat for the last decade and a half because we've watched one of the greatest players ever play, and he's still playing. He's still classy. He's playing at a high level, and that's the thing. We're not watching him decline slowly, sadly into fading into
Nothing,
a career.
yeah.
Right. Like you watch some of these. Brett Favre, his fall. He played so well for so long, and his fall was spectacular. We've seen it steadily with guys like Joe Flacco, but with Larry Fitzgerald, I mean, you get Terrell Owens just trying to hang on somewhere, and Larry Fitzgerald continues to be very solid. Last year, the numbers were down. Now he's on pace, I think, for 80 catches for about 850 yards, which it's not fantastic, but, you can live with that, especially with some of the inconsistencies in the passing game that we've had during the season. But as long as he's playing, there's this place of gratitude in my heart as a Cardinals fan because this is something unique, guys. If you haven't figured it out, there isn't another player in the league like Larry Fitzgerald. Between the production and the respect he has just across the league, he is probably I don't think it's hyperbole to say this. I think he is the most respected player in the entire league, and we get to watch him every week.
Yeah, and I mean, you go back to even last game when he, pancaked Nick Bosa, and Nick's response was nothing, outlandish or negative or didn't take a shot. He just, got me good. I mean, that was it, because that's the kind of respect that he has, earned as an NFL player over his long and storied career. And now you just hope that he has a chance to go out in a Jerome Bettis type setting where he's still making a contribution and he can go out on top. I think the other guy that we've become more thankful for every year, especially as the defense has collapsed, is Chandler Jones, and just how, despite all the failings around him, he continues to be this kind of rock solid, every game player that puts up, potential Hall of Fame numbers as we continue to go on.
His numbers have been fantastic. He doesn't get the fanfare because of what the Cardinals have done. Unfortunately, the Cardinals they haven't been real competitive since he came to the Cardinals, and he was supposed to be a piece that kind of set them over the top, and it hasn't done that. That said, he also, in general, doesn't have those huge games where he has 3 and 4 sacks. He's had a couple of them, but you can plug it. You can pencil in a sack and a half, basically every week, and by the end of the year, he's first or second or third in sacks, and you don't really realize it. He's not flashy. He's another really fantastic human being in the way that he interacts with his teammates in the league and with fans. And so, yes, it is. We get to watch one of the best do great work without a lot of fanfare as well.
Yeah, and it's just been fun to kind of see and watch the way he works as a technician every week and the way he develops and grows. And it's just been, it's been a pleasure, even though, like you said, it hasn't worked out to the degree that everybody was hoping. It's still been great.
Coming up next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, we're going to talk about the three-headed running back situation. The Cardinals actually have 3 healthy running backs. How are they going to use them? That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. And for the first time in quite some time, the Cardinals have all of their key running backs healthy. At first, and granted, the first of the season, it was David Johnson and Chase Edmonds. They were the only guys. But then David Johnson got hurt, and then it was only Chase Edmonds. Then Chase Edmonds got hurt, and then it was only Kenyon Drake. Then Kenyon Drake and David Johnson, and now against the Rams, all 3 should be available, which presents an interesting dynamic because Chase Edmonds was clearly trending upward with his play and performance before he got hurt. And while David Johnson has been steadily, seemingly to bury himself into a doghouse, and now you've got Kenyon Drake. Cliff Kingsbury's enamored with him. Is there a possibility that all 3 of these guys can make contributions to the team, and will it work?
I mean, we've seen it work in other places, and if anybody's creative, easy enough to say, creative enough to force or get 3 talented backs touches, it would be Cliff Kingsbury. I'm more interested in this part of how do the touches work. I mean, we talked a bit last week about how David Johnson was basically phased out in the San Francisco game, 0 touches. They took to the social media to give you their, displeasure without giving you their displeasure. But then you have the fact that Chase Edmonds has been better than David Johnson, and Kenyon Drake is the more kind of complete David Johnson 2016-esque player. So I'm more interested in how they break down the touches because I don't think it's plausible to get all 3 consistent touches in a game. So I'm just interested to see how this all works.
And for me, the whole David Johnson thing is quite interesting because he has been supposed to be the workhorse. And I'm going to point to this. When he's had a workhorse load, he's been productive. He just hasn't been dynamic in the running game. In the games where he's gotten 15 carries or more, he's been productive. Not flashy, but definitely acceptable. I mean, I think in those games he was averaging over 4 yards a carry up through 6 games while the rushing numbers were down and the overall yards were down across the board in yards from scrimmage. He was still producing at about 4.1 yards per carry, which is, I think he had 4.2 yards per carry in 2016. However, whether it is the lack of involvement in certain ball games that led to his decline or whether it was his lack of production that led to his lack of utilization in some of these games in the running game, he has found himself, I mean, for lack of a better word or phrase, rock bottom in terms of where he is on the depth chart. And so was the game against San Francisco just kind of the wake-up call for him to get him to to practice harder and to give more effort and to do that. And especially coming off his quote-unquote best week of practice all season, it's going to be interesting to see, is he really in the doghouse or can they pull off a rotation? Because I still think that Chase Edmonds, while he proved that he can carry that load against the Giants, before he did it, there was the question is whether he could be a feature type back and could shoulder that load. If you look at the rotation that the 49ers have between Matt Breida, Tevin Coleman, and Raheem Mostert. Now, granted, they've often not had all three running backs healthy. I think Chase Edmonds is probably going to trend towards the Mostert side of things. They'll have moments for him, but the part that you like about Edmonds is that he brings a big play dynamic that more so than the other two. Like, if you look at, he's got 4 touchdowns this season. Every single one of them came from more than 20 yards out, which he's a big play threat. He hits the hole quickly, and I think he's the fastest of the three. But David Johnson still, if you use him in the backfield and move him out to receiver and flex him out. So that's the part with David Johnson. What makes him great is what he does in the passing game. But what makes him great in the passing game is that you've got to start him in the backfield and you've got to give him touches in the running game. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works. Now, the truth is, Chase Edmonds kind of said it, if the Cardinals are trending towards the 80 to 90 plays they'd ideally like to run in a football game, there are touches for everyone. The problem is if you're playing 60 to 65, then you're looking at because David Johnson is kind of proven to be the sort of workhorse guy where he's most effective if he gets most of the touches. Kenyon Drake can be impactful with limited, and so can Chase Edmonds. Will the rotation actually diminish the potential production between the three?
I mean, they would, like you said, they're going to have to get upwards of, what would you say, at least 75 plays to get kind of a 30-30-15 maybe. But I think sometimes too you have to go with a hot hand, right? Like if Drake is playing like he was in the San Francisco game, I think you gotta stick with Drake. If Edmonds is running like he was in the Giants game, you stick with Edmonds. I mean, that's also part of the equation. I will say this: the Cardinals don't have a Leonard Fournette or Derrick Henry type where they need 25 plus touches to get into the rhythm to get their yardage. They don't have Adrian Peterson. You get what I'm saying? Like, they don't have these guys that have to get to wear down a defense before then they can make those big plays. They're at least Edmonds and Drake from a running aspect are big play guys, 6+ yards per carry guys. The question becomes David Johnson and how you get him to be productive and what is the most productive role for his abilities at this time. Because I think a lot of it is if you can use DJ on the field with you can have DJ and Drake or Edmonds and then have your 3 wide receivers or 2 wide receivers and Max Williams, because then he is that pseudo tight end wide receiver kind of slot guy. And then you can use your running back as a running back. There's just going to be a lot of questions on what this ends up looking like and how they are willing to split the carries to get the most productivity out of the 3, but more importantly, the offense as a whole.
How many carries? If we're going to talk, I'll ask about each thing. If you had to pick a number of carries that you think David Johnson will get between now and the end of the year, how many carries it is? On the afternoon radio show here locally, they actually said that Dave Burns said it was real low. He thought about 18 carries the rest of the way. I still personally think he's probably over the next 5 games going to get 30 carries. Do you think he gets that many?
I mean, again, if he ends up with 30 carries over 5 games,
because that's only 6 a game.
Right, but my question then becomes, what was the role of Drake or Edmonds? Because, I mean, I guess you could, because you could see him get hot in one game and get 15 carries and then maybe get 15 carries the rest of the season. But I would lean on, if there's, and I don't even know, what are they averaging right now? About 26 rushes a game, and probably about 22 to 20 without Kyler Murray. So over 5 games, if there's 100 carries, I mean, that's what the question becomes. Are you going to split it where you get 35 for Edmonds, 35 for Drake, 35 for Edmonds, and 30 for DJ, or are you going to give it, 60 for Drake, 30 for DJ, and Edmonds kind of gets those leftover reps? Like I said, I think, to me, that's the most interesting part. I don't know if we'll get the whole story in game 1, but I think we'll get a lot of the story in game 1, especially if they're able to continue to have success.
Right. If you had to guess in terms of touches from most to least, how do you think that order goes?
Drake, DJ, Edmonds.
That makes sense. That does make sense. Edmonds can impact in other ways because he can play and is happy to play special teams, and he is more suited in terms of experience to a lesser role. Well, David Johnson, that's something David Johnson's going to have to adjust to. Honestly, the whole David Johnson saga this week is really telling because the bye week, it's after getting no touches. How does he respond? That's really important as we move forward. Coming next on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, we're going to talk about Jordan Mills, a name you probably had forgotten about. He could be entering the starting lineup again, or at least a possibility. That's coming next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. On Monday, returning to practice for the first time since week 4 was Jordan Mills, right tackle, played in 3 games, was signed after Marcus Gilbert tore his ACL, was placed on injured reserve. He sat a week basically, started the next 2 games, then he suffered a knee injury. He's been designated to return. He's going to be back on the active roster here in the next couple of weeks. The question is, well, what do you think his impact will be? Do you think that the Cardinals will put him back in the lineup? Or do you think that Justin Murray has done enough to kind of keep Mills on the bench? Because Mills has been pretty much a starter for most of his career.
Yeah, and I was intrigued as to why when they did it, because it's weird that Max Garcia and Jordan Mills would be their 2 IR returns, right? Because
technically they still have one more because Max was on PUP.
Oh, PUP,
his doesn't
that's
count.
right.
So technically, like Robert Alford still could be a possibility. They could still bring back someone else if they so desired to.
Yeah, and so I mean, it's just weird that they need so many backup offensive linemen. But like you said, I mean, most of these guys haven't played full years in a long time. So, but it would also be interesting if Justin Murray had a reduced role coming off his best game of his career, wouldn't it?
Right.
So I don't know. For me, I think I think Mills is more of your veteran backup than anything else at this point. And to ensure that you don't have to shuffle 2 spots in case anything happens, move Pugh and then bring Cole in. And it does make me wonder, I mean, if Mills is starting, then that's one thing. But if Mills is the backup, that does make me wonder even more what the internal thoughts of Mason Cole are. Because at that point, like you said, Max Garcia has been activated off PUP, and now Jordan Mills has been brought back, seemingly doing so to not have to get Mason Cole in the lineup, which, again, is weird to me because I don't think Cole was that bad in his 2 games that he had to play.
No, but at the same time, Justin Pugh, they did kind of have the gentleman's agreement when he signed with the Cardinals that he was just going to play guard. He was willing to play tackle, but it's not like he wanted to play tackle or enjoyed moving from left guard to right tackle. I'm interested to see how this goes because when they claimed Murray, they didn't think necessarily he was ready to start. They were pleased with what he did in that first week. But then they went out and signed a tackle, and who then, within another week, was then starting in Murray's place. I wonder if they still see it like that, as they've seen Murray throughout the year. They feel Mills might have a little more upside or might be a little more consistent. Because it does add an interesting dynamic, because now you've got 2 guys that are going to be free agents at the end of the season. If Mills ends up being in the lineup again, you kind of get to choose, okay, what are we going to do at right tackle? Do these two guys who've been in the league a little while, are they options at right tackle as the starter going forward, or you bring them both back? It's interesting because I hadn't actually thought of it the way you were talking about what they think about Mason Cole, and everything they said about Mason Cole has been fantastic. But what it does is it allows them to push a guy like Joshua Miles inactive, and then you've got both Gilliard and Miles. They're day 3 offensive line picks. They don't even have to be active on game days, and so now you've got, whether it's Murray or Mills coming off the bench, you've got Murray, Mills, and you've got Cole, and you've got Max Garcia as your bench guys, and so it does provide a little bit, and it maybe they're doing a little bit of competitive play in practice, kind of repping them back and forth and see who plays better at right tackle, kind of like they did at the beginning of the season. And we'll see from there whether it's Mills who stands out or whether it's Murray. And I'm interested to see what this means for the offseason for both Mills and Murray. Because Murray's he's going to be a restricted free agent, isn't?
Yeah.
And so you've got the restricted free agent, and then Mills, of course, being a vested vet, he'll be a free agent. But the Cardinals would give themselves a couple options for right tackle and maybe not have to go out and spend big money there, rather go spend that money on defense.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we talked about, that that's probably what they want to do, that they want to make sure that they can focus financially on the defense. And a lot of the times, and this is all speculation that you and I have talked about quite a bit off the air, but I at times wonder if they've given Vance Joseph assurances, despite whatever happens on the field this year, we knew you were going to take one for the team, and we will make sure that it's better, in year 2. I don't think they expected, obviously, the downfall of Patrick Peterson that has come since he's come back from his suspension. However, the reality is they've gotten far superior play out of guys like Justin Murray and, J.R. Sweezy and A.Q. Shipley than they have, most of their defensive signings outside of, maybe Jordan Hicks this year. I mean, Byron Murphy's really fallen off a ledge. Obviously, we talked about Peterson. Budda Baker's been solid. but they haven't got anything from Terrell Suggs. Jordan Hicks is putting up really good counting stats, but he's kind of, you can see why the Eagles were, a desperate team for linebackers was willing to let him go. And so I think when you look at it from that perspective, retaining Murray and Garcia is probably going to be kind of important heading into next offseason, because it'll going to be about the continuity of the roster and the team and the depth.
And with that, coming up next on Rise Up See Red, we're going to talk about a potential continuity situation as DJ Humphries with a potential contract extension coming. That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. And we knew back for, it's been a couple of weeks, but among the players that the Cardinals have been in negotiations with for a contract extension is left tackle DJ Humphries, which could potentially make him the first Steve Keim first-round draft pick to sign a second contract with the team. And it hasn't been reported nationally from what I could see, but with guys around on sites like ours have been saying that they're currently in negotiations. They talked over the bye week and would like to get it done by the end of the season or before free agency happens. And so DJ Humphries sticking around might just happen. One, we shouldn't be surprised based on conversations we've had. And two, what do you think of it?
I think you and I have kind of had an idea that this was coming. It makes sense for a couple of reasons. One, you look at the kind of off-season choices, they're going to be limited. Two, you look at the history of rookie left tackles in the NFL, and it's not exactly what you would say great. And so when you look at it from those perspectives and you kind of look at what DJ has done this year, this solid if unspectacular season, I think retaining him and kind of continuing that continuity along the offensive line, especially if it's at a reasonable price, sure does make a lot of sense for a team that, as much as you want to be negative about a lot of the things that have happened this year, I think you have to be super positive about the reality of what this team has done offensively. And a lot of that credit needs to go to the offensive line and their play so far in this season.
The question for me, it will be, what type of deal is it? How long and how much? If obviously DJ's at the point in his career, he's going to want to sign a long-term deal. And because of his age and athleticism, if he finishes the year healthy, if he's going to hit free agency, he might not get, top to money, but there's a lot of money to be had for a guy his age and with his athleticism and to be honest, some of the film that he's got now shows that he is more than capable of being a starting left tackle. He's not going to be he's not a top starting left tackle, but left tackles, even capable left tackles, still get massive amounts of money. So is it going to be for 5 years? Is he looking? Because he said himself he doesn't want to play anywhere else. He wants to play here his entire career. Of course, that's good and happy. That is under the understanding that, one, he plays a long time. Two, he's a starter. When three, which means the team is paying him money. How much would you be willing to? Would you go past 3 years, and would you go past, say, $12 million a year?
I think your offer comes in at 4 years, $50 million, with basically around 30 to 35 million guaranteed. So you're telling him that, hey, we're going to pay you like a top 10 left tackle in the NFL. And let's be honest, anybody that starts, multiple seasons in a row for a team is a top 10 left tackle at this point when you just talk about the turnover at that position. I'm not saying DJ is a top 10 left tackle. I'm just saying from that how it kind of turns over so frequently. I think if you can get him to do basically a 3-year deal with a 4th year where they have no guaranteed money on it, that's the way to go. And even if it's even if you look at it as what's the word I'm looking for? You look at it as a deal kind of like Quan Alexander, where you front load it and maybe you give DJ 17 or 20 million this year. And then, you're basically off scot-free after year 2. I think that's a good way to load the contract as well. Basically, you want to protect yourself if you're the Cardinals that he played well in a contract year, or B, that he starts to get nicked up again. I think that's the way you want to do it. And here's the dirty secret and the reality of it. The Cardinals are going to be flush with cash. Okay. If DJ Humphries doesn't want to play ball, he's your franchise tag. And he plays on a 1-year franchise tag while you figure out what you do at left tackle the next year. Because then you can go in, and I brought it up, briefly, but you go through the drafts, and quite frankly, like getting a left tackle that's a plug and play guy that plays at a high level is really hard to do. I mean, you look at last year, Mike McGlinchey was drafted. He was a stellar offensive lineman, played left tackle in college. They moved him to right tackle, and he's never moved from there. I mean, even with Joe Staley getting hurt the last 2 years, he's never moved. The guy that started at left tackle was Colton Miller. He was miserable as a rookie. I mean, completely awful.
Laramie Tunsil was not great.
Yeah, Laramie Tunsil. Isaiah Wynn last year didn't play at all. And then got hurt this year. So now he's back, which is, great. But when you look at it from the perspective of like, hey, the Cardinals have a top, let's say 7 pick, just draft Andrew Thomas, the top rated tackle, or one of the Iowa kids. Okay. Well, again, go through the last couple drafts. Most left tackles aren't very good as rookies. So you're going to get a downgrade in the immediate, and a top 7 pick is going to make quite a bit of money as well. So you're still going to pay virtually the same in year 1 as you would when you talk about guarantees and things of that nature, that you would to paying DJ. So my thing would be, if you can't come to an accord with DJ on a 3 or 4 year deal that really protects the team, I think it makes a boatload of sense to franchise him, and then you can draft his replacement on day 1 or early day 2 and go from there. But I think unless you're going to pony up 15 plus million to an Anthony Costanzo type, that's 32, by the way, you're going to have a problem at left tackle when it seems like finally that DJ's turned a corner and is at least playing up to his ability. A lot of that, does come down to the fact that he's healthy, but just playing up to his ability.
Coming up next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, best of Cardinals talk on the web. As we move forward, what are the specifics that the Cardinals need to do in the final 5 games? What things that they need to look at and make significant improvement, or even incremental improvement? That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Cliff Kingsbury is calling this last part of the season, the final 5 weeks, is a whole new season. What they did in the past, the first 11 games, doesn't matter. They're looking ahead. And I'll be honest, I kind of like the potential to to have the Cardinals improve, get in a rhythm, and finish the season strong. If we look back at 2007, let's go back 2007 was Ken Wisenhunt's first year. They were 3-5 to start the year. They finished and won 5 of their last 8. So more specifically, they won their final 2 games to get to 500 to 8-8. That sort of play propelled them to the next year. Now, granted, they only finished 9-7. They were a division winner and a playoff team that went to the Super Bowl. And so there was that momentum at the end of the year. With Bruce Arians, saw the same thing. They started out 3-4. They won 7 of their last 9 games, and 3 of their last 4. And so you look at that, and the next season they went 9-1 to start the year. They did limp into the playoffs in 11-5, but that was a year that they looked like they could be special. The Cardinals aren't going to be a Super Bowl contender next year. They're not going to be the best team in the league, and they're probably not going to compete for a Super Bowl, and maybe not the division next year. But playing well over the final stretch of the year is important for these players who are going to stay in the system so that they know that they're going in the right direction. Now, there's clearly some things that they need to improve on specifically. I wrote a piece about it on Monday, that there are 4 particular areas that they need to improve upon, even if it's just a little bit. Before I get into that, Seth, where do you see the Cardinals needing to specifically find improvement over the last month of the year?
I mean, I think the easy kind of low-hanging fruit's the defense. So I'll leave that as like an obvious, right? Like, okay, the defense has to get better because it's been a complete, crap show. So I'll start with the red zone efficiency offense. Now, from a points being created situation, they're top 8, I believe, in the NFL at this juncture in offensive drives resulting in points. The problem is they're second to last or third to last. They may have moved up to third after the San Francisco game, and I quite frankly didn't check after this weekend's games, in terms of total red zone touchdown efficiency. So when you look at it from that perspective, if they're going to get in the red zone, let's see some finishing, especially, and I know this is going to sound sacrilege, but especially when you're 3-7-1. Like, no offense, you're not making the playoffs. This is just not happening this year. So create an atmosphere and a kind of a situation where you put your players and say, hey, we're going to push this to the limit. We're going, early in games, not game tying or game winning field goals, but early in games, we're going to go for it a lot on 4th down, a la what the Baltimore Ravens are doing. We're going to be aggressive when we get into the red zone, and on 4th and shorts, we're going to continue to go for it and try to get touchdowns and not settle for field goals. I think that would be something that would be great to see early.
Well, and if you look at that, they are, and I actually, red zone offense was one of the things that I put as their in 4 critical areas to improve. They are 29th in touchdowns in the red zone with 36.9% of the time. So roughly just more than a third of the time they're scoring touchdowns when they get. But, at 29th, if you go up 5 spots to 24th, that rate jumps up to 50%. And I think the league average, I think Cliff Kingsbury said it was, it's about 50. Maybe, I can't remember if it was 50 or 60 or 66%, but I think he wants to aim even higher than that. I think he was at Texas A&M, at Texas Tech. I think they were at 66%. It's the kind of the standard he wants to set. You get in the red zone, you score touchdowns. But if they can, based on what we've seen offensively, if they can take that 37% rate and over the final games improve that to 50%, that's going to give them leads that they're not. It's going to make it far less likely that the defense is going to blow the lead because they've got more points, their lead's bigger, and so it's going to be harder to take care of that. That was one of them, obviously. I actually had 2 parts to the defense two parts to the defense. One is just the passing defense in general, because they're giving up nearly 300 yards a game. The numbers are bad. A league high 297.5 yards per game, a league high 29 touchdown passes, and the passer rating allowed is 113. They are making every quarterback look like Hall of Famers. What is it? The highest career QB rating isn't it like Aaron Rodgers right now, like 104 or 105? And the Cardinals. The Cardinals are giving up 113 to the entire league. So the entire league is Hall of Fame elite championship winning quarterbacks against them. That's got to improve. And just take the 11th worst. So we go up to the Miami Dolphins, who have an atrocious defense. They have the 11th worst pass defense, and that's 45 yards less. So if the Cardinals can give up 45 fewer yards per game, guess what? They could probably get a stop or two if they do that, right? If we're going to look at these numbers incrementally, if they can get that down to 250 yards per game in the final five, that's significant improvement.
Right, and I think that is a big concern and point, and I think it's an excellent point, because this has been an issue the entire season. And so when you look at it from that kind of perspective of this team needs, somebody to consistently step up and make plays, you see that there hasn't been that guy in the secondary, that guy that is – making, like, Jalen Thompson and Jordan Hicks, their interceptions in the last game were important, but I wouldn't call those making the plays. Would you? I mean, those weren't guys that went and made a play. Those were guys that made the play in front of them. And let's be honest, that hasn't happened very much either. But when you look at a guy that's making a kind of game-changing play, the only one that's done that all season has been Chandler Jones. And so whether it's in the passing game or whether it's against the run, I think you need to see not just turnovers, but you need to see those kind of game-altering plays where I guess you can say the Patrick Peterson sack strip fumble in the New York Giants game was that type of play too. And so that's what I think you need to see from this this team, is that you need to see guys that can put themselves in a position to make game-changing plays and create opportunities for, as we discussed a little earlier, a really good offense that just needs a little bit of help on defense.
And essentially, they need to get more hands on footballs. They need to be knocking away more passes, whether it's creating turnovers. They're just not getting enough hands on footballs, period, in the passing game. It's like their defense is hope they drop a pass or hope the quarterback throws a bad pass.
Right. I mean, outside of the Chandler Jones strip sacks, there's not too many turnovers created that you've seen this year, and I'm surprised actually. They're up to 26 in turnovers, so there's some bad teams below them still. But they are forcing quite a few fumbles, so I'll give them that.
Now, another part defensively is just the third down defense, because that's what they're doing on third down is just awfully bad. 46% of the time teams convert on third down. And I was looking at the stats when I put it together. 17 of the 34 teams in the league are at 40% or below 40%. Now, that would mean getting to 40% would be that's a 6% drop. But that would put them in the middle of the pack in the league. And if if you can take that 46% and take it down to 40% over the last 5 games on average, I'm not talking about on the season. I'm just looking at this 5-game section. If you can get that down to 40%, think of that. That is probably 2 stops a game more. What would the Cardinals' record be with 2 more stops a game?
Well, especially when you're talking about those game-losing drives that they've had.
Yeah, they're 3 stops away from 6 and 5.
Right, and so when you look at it from that perspective, you're just exactly. You need a team, or you need to see more from the team, in terms of creating opportunities for the offense and just being able to consistently put stops on the field, especially in those like kind of backbreaking drives that we've talked about, like right before the halves. Obviously, the game-ending drives are the ones that get all of the publicity, but we talked about it. San Francisco went down and got a field goal. The Tampa Bay game, Tampa Bay scored in like 50 seconds on 75 yards in 50 seconds. You have the San Francisco game prior where they scored the touchdown right before the half. I mean, all of those games, like you can't win games when you go in on a real low note in the at halftime. And so that's going to be something key to kind of continue to watch. I think another thing that, and you kind of hit on it from the defensive perspective, but the offensive perspective is converting third downs. They're not awful. They're at 19th, 36.4%, but that's literally 10% less than what the defense is allowing. And they're virtually equal. There's been 144 third down attempts against the Cardinals. They've given up 67. There's been 140 third down attempts by the Arizona Cardinals offense, and they've only converted 51. So that means that those 16 extra attempts or 16 extra conversions in only 4 additional attempts is kind of what Jess hit on. That's the difference in a 6-5 team, and it's both sides of the ball. I mean, if you convert late in games and you take extra time off the clock, or you don't throw an interception, or you're able to continue the game rolling, you really do give yourself a better chance than what they have thus far.
Well, and think about it. I mean, this offense has scored 25 points or more in 6 of their last 7 ball games, and yet they are still one of the worst teams. They're below average on third down, and they're one of the worst teams at scoring touchdowns in the red zone, and they're still scoring 25 points a game. This is an offensive scheme that if they get those things average, they're a 30-point a game team.
Yeah, and that's that's something that we talked about. So they're at 37% basically red zone efficiency, which is touchdowns per red zone attempt. The defense is giving up 61%. Yeah. So here's the crazy thing. So 61%. So again, the Cardinals are at 37% and they're 29th. So they moved up from 30th to 29th. The defense giving up 61% of their red zone drives, they give up result in touchdowns. So 26 touchdowns on only 43 red zone attempts. That's only 24th. So that means there's 9 teams worse than them. So, I mean, while it's awful, imagine if the Cardinals just moved up 5 spots and were equal, in terms of red zone efficiency on offense and could match their terrible defense. That would be a huge kind of win for them as well.
The other thing that I wrote in my article was, and I actually was surprised by this, I know the Cardinals have been penalized a lot. Then I looked it up. They are tied with the Browns for the most penalties in football. I mean, Penalties are the result of two things: mental mistakes and bad technique. You can't win football games with mental mistakes or bad technique. And that's just shooting themselves in the foot every week, and you're giving away yardage. And if you're giving away yardage and you already have a defense that gives away yardage,
yeah,
that doesn't work. So if you're going to be bad defensively, you at least be disciplined and not give away other yards just for being dumb. Whether it's holding penalties, offensive pass interference, defensive holding, defensive basis, false starts, there's really no acceptable penalty. You just want to limit those. Now, you're not going to get rid of all of them, but you can't be the most penalized team in football and expect to be good.
No, and then you look at situations, you're talking about that, go to the what we talked about earlier with DJ Humphries. He's tied for the second most holds in the NFL at 11. So simple things like that, cleaning up. Because when you look at, their negative plays, like you said, they're tied for first in penalties taken on the year, so 94. The crazy thing about that is they're only ninth in penalty yardage at 730. You're talking – that's 162 yards less than the Browns, who are number one.
That's a lot of the stupid 5-yard penalties.
Right. That's a lot of – how many times have we seen it this year with Terrell Suggs just offsides? But yeah, so they're 162 away from the top, which, again, that's a lot. They're 220 away from the bottom. So that's – in yardage, that is – crazy to me to think that they are that far away from being just good, and they just, for whatever reason, are not able to help themselves, and it's always ticky-tacky, pointless penalties, and now you're seeing kind of that's what happens when you're a bad football team.
Exactly. Coming up next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, we're going to wrap up this show talking about the LA Rams. Can they beat them? How will they beat them? And what are our preview and predictions? That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talking the web. We haven't even talked about the LA Rams, and the Rams are coming off an embarrassing performance against the Ravens, and now they're 6-5. They come to town. They're on a short week, having been embarrassed, and the Cardinals are coming off their bye. This seems like the perfect. If there were ever a script you could write to prepare the Cardinals to get a win in the division, this would be it, right? Against a team that's underperformed, that has weaknesses, and is clearly not in a good place right now.
Yeah, and we're hopeful about that, but I did a little digging because I was interested after the Cardinals obviously had the two embarrassing blowouts last year, and then obviously you had the game last night, 45-6. So Pro Football Reference is one of the sites that Justin and I use ad nauseum because it just has more statistical work than you can ever imagine. And I went through and I was like, all right, how many teams have lost 45-6? Well, ironically, the last team to lose 45-6 was the Seattle Seahawks, and that was in 1976 against the Los Angeles Rams. So the Rams were involved in the last two 45-6 games in NFL history. That's 39-point loss is huge. That's an embarrassing loss. I was wondering, how do you come back from that? So the 76 Seahawks finished 2-11-1 because they only played 14 games back then. And they came back and got their second win of the season the next game. I was like, that's interesting. So then I went to the Cardinals. Cardinals get blown out by the Rams in game 2, 34-0. They have the kind of bonehead play and missed field goal in the Bears game, but lose a close one to a really good Bears team, 13-6. They get embarrassed on Thursday Night Football by the Denver Broncos, 45-10. The next game they win, 18-15. They get blown out by the Los Angeles Chargers, 45-10. They beat the Packers the next game, 20-17. So it's going to go one of two ways. Either the Rams are going to limp into this game and be defeated, or they're going to take the butt whooping that they were just giving on national TV and look at this and go, no, we're a better team than this. We can't let this happen again. And they're going to come out ultra focused, because even a 3-13 Cardinals team, they responded by playing better football the next week before the wheels completely came off in December. So I agree with you that when you look at it from the perspective of this season, that the Cardinals are in a really positive position to play this LA Rams team. It's going to be one of those things where the Cardinals are going to have to know that they're coming in with the Rams ultra focused at this point, because they don't want to lose a second game in a row, especially after that shellacking they took on national TV.
Now, at 6-5, Jared Goff doesn't look like what he did last year. Doesn't look anything like him. Todd Gurley has kind of been going through the David Johnson decline, only not as drastic. They've obviously got all sorts of things. They Aqib Talib on IR. They traded away Marcus Peters. They added Jalen Ramsey. But the offensive line, they had turnover in the offseason. They lost their center. Can we pinpoint what's been the problem for the Rams? I thought that this is the question I had, and if you go back to if we go back to the shows that we had leading up to the season, everyone is predicting 12, 13, 14 wins for the Rams this year. But the one question is that, well, what was the one thing that they had last year? They had continuity and great offensive line play. And then they lost 2 of their starters, and they were counting on young players to fill in for them. And so that change in the offensive line, how effective we're going to be, and we've seen them be much different. This is a team that's essentially, talent-wise, hasn't changed much. They added talent on defense, and they maintained their talent on offense and have kind of spiraled.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes down to teams figuring out the complete Jared Goff experience, and the fact that he's really not this franchise quarterback. And we're seeing that unravel for a couple of teams. I think you're seeing a little bit in Philly right now. So when you look at what Goff has done this year, it's been fairly pedestrian. You see a guy that is not playing with the same level of confidence and swagger that he played last year. They've dealt with a ton of injuries this season. Gurley's had knee issues that he's had to kind of play through. They haven't gotten full games from not Robert Woods, who's Brandon Cooks. They haven't gotten full games from Brandon Cooks, who's been, banged up and had some health issues. So when you look at it from that perspective, you kind of just see a team that is just, it's not moving in the right direction after the year that they had last year, where everybody assumed that they were going to continue on the same track. But I think a lot of that comes down to what we talked about. When you lose offensive linemen, it makes it really difficult to have that continuity and really maintain the same level of play if you don't have a great quarterback. And that's kind of what the secret sauce is you can get away with not having a great quarterback if you have the pieces around him. But, like you said, you lose offensive linemen. You lose the guys that you replace them with aren't quite as good. You get continual lack of development from the defense that you drafted. These things all play into the same kind of issue, and I think you're seeing that kind of unfold all into one messy season where they just, they've lost too many important players, and then the players that they expected to develop and replace those players were never stepped up. And then, like I said, the Goff factor of when you go from a guy who was when you go from a guy that last season, he threw 32 touchdowns and only 12 interceptions. The season before that, he threw 28 touchdowns and only 7 interceptions. This year, he's thrown 12 interceptions to 11 touchdowns. He went the entire month of November without throwing a single touchdown pass. Not one. I mean, Jess and I literally had the same amount of touchdown passes as Jared Goff in December. And the crazy thing is, the Pittsburgh defense is okay. The Bears defense is good, and they won that game. The Baltimore defense is, it is what it is. It's gotten a lot better, I would say, since the Cardinals played them. But it's not like they were playing these elite defenses. They just didn't play well. And it's, all of that has combined to make this season basically a complete failure from the outlook of this team is just not – they're not a competitive team. They're not a contending team. And when you just sign your quarterback to a record-breaking deal and then he falls off a cliff in terms of production – Goff, just to match his second year, not even last year's, astronomical Pro Bowl level numbers, but just to match last year or his second year numbers, he's going to have to throw for over 800 yards the last 5 games. He could get half of those against the Cardinals. Let's be completely honest.
But Jimmy Garoppolo, he can get almost all those yards in 2 games.
But he would have to throw 17 touchdowns in the final 5 games. And only 2 of those games are against the Cardinals. So the chance that he's throwing 17 touchdowns in the final 5 games, which include, like I said, 2 against the Cardinals, they've got to play Seattle. They've got to play at Dallas. I think they have a game left against – they have to go to San Francisco still. Even if he puts up Garoppolo-like numbers against the Cardinals, he's not throwing 17 touchdowns. So, the staggering fall-off and now being 2 games out of the playoffs in the wild card and 3 within the Cardinals, and Rams division to the Seahawks, it's virtually impossible to see them making a run to the playoffs. And so you wonder how much that will weigh on the team this, coming into this game.
So defensive, let's look at them. One of the top run defenses in the league, yet they got run all over by the Ravens. The Cardinals have been running the ball well. They're not a top run defense, rushing offense, but it's better than they've ever had, running about 5 yards a carry. Can they have success against this Rams defense that has been really good against the run, except for the Ravens game?
I think they can. You kind of look at through their season. They gave up, in the first game against the Panthers, they gave up 166 yards. They gave up 127 yards. When they lost to the Seahawks, they gave up 167 yards. When they lost to the Ravens last night. They gave up 285 yards. All their losses outside of the Pittsburgh game kind of coincide with big rushing days from the opponent. I mean, the 49ers had 99 yards rushing. Their loss to the Bucs, they had 88 yards rushing. And then the other thing with those is their losses. The Ravens had 480 total yards. The Buccaneers had 464 yards. The Seahawks had 429 yards. They are a team that doesn't really – they're not going to stop teams consistently. Their best games on defense, were against the Falcons, which, I mean, let's be honest, is still impressive. The Drew Brees injury game, and then the Chicago Bears. They had a nice game against the Cleveland Browns, but that was when the Browns were in their kind of tailspin to begin the year. On the flip side, their offense has put up huge yardage numbers, but they kind of struggle in the same way the Cardinals do. The Cardinals and Rams are at a virtual tie in terms of points per game, which, I mean, let's be honest, if you told us that when the Cardinals and Rams met in week 13, after 11 games, that they would both be averaging 22.6 points per game, I think everybody would have been like, okay, sign me up. I mean, so when you look at it from that perspective, you have a team that puts up a ton of yardage. I mean, they especially in the air, they do a great job of getting yards in the air, but they don't throw a ton of touchdowns. Again, only 11 this season. They throw a boatload of picks. They've thrown 13 this year already. And they don't particularly run the ball well. They're averaging less than 4 yards per carry. They don't run the ball very often, which may be a bad thing for the Cardinals this week because, let's be honest, their run defense is far superior to their pass defense at this juncture. So from that, you have to wonder if the Rams and Cardinals get in a shootout, if it plays more to the Cardinals' advantage than it does the Rams' advantage, because it seems like the Cardinals are still able to run the ball because of Kyler, where the Rams, they'll continue to throw the ball, and Jared Goff is not finding the end zone very frequently.
Prediction time then. I have the Cardinals holding on to this one. I think offensively, they've shown they can score on pretty much anyone now. And I think they will continue to do that. And I think this time they will get that one stop. I've got them winning this game 31-28. It'll be fun and wild and difficult to watch because both teams are going to be scoring, but I think they hold on this time, and this will start potentially what can be a nice 3-game winning streak, ideally, or at least the first of 2 home wins in this 3-game stretch.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I think this is potentially a game winner for them. I think the Cardinals can go out and they could put up another 27, 30 points on a team and come away with the win this time. I think the Cardinals win 28-23.
Awesome. Hopefully next week we can talk about that. So we will wrap up this edition of the Rise Up Seaward podcast. This is episode 249. We will be back again in a week. Next Tuesday we'll record. Wednesday it'll drop. And ideally we're talking about what they've got, a win over the Rams as we look ahead to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But until then, that's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening, and make sure to subscribe to the show and give it a 5-star rating as always. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red Sea Red, and of course, rise up, Sea Red.
Rise